Believe it or not, this whole thing started with a donut. And more specifically, it was an apple fritter. And more specifically than that, it was about not being able to get an apple fritter. But you know what? I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back it up. I'm going to break down how I shot a Spec commercial for a donut shop with zero budget. We're gonna talk about planning, shooting, editing, color grading, music, sound effects, the whole thing. But before we go in and break it down, we better actually watch the Spec commercial. So secure the cup and please enjoy.
There are few things in life worth giving up everything for. Things worth pushing through the pain and struggle to achieve the end goal. But when you do find that thing, there is nothing you wouldn't do. No task too difficult. No misery too unbearable that you wouldn't push through to overcome, achieve success, and lay your hands on that wonderful prize.
Tell me you have one.
We're out.
Not again.
Oh, hey, welcome back. So that was the Spec commercial. Let me get rid of this plate and I'll break down how we made it. Kicking things off with planning. Technically, the planning of this video started with a basic idea and a joke even. Once a week or so, my partner and I go for a walk. We stop at a coffee shop called Discovery Coffee. They have Yanni's donuts there and I absolutely love their apple fritters. On the day that we're available to go for that walk, they're almost always sold out of them already and they don't get another batch till later in the day. Fast forward to about a week later, I'm thinking, man, I should really shoot a Spec ad. That would be fun to do one of these days. And I'm thinking that everybody always does these running Spec ads, Nike or Adidas or Gatorade or something along those lines. And I thought, how funny would it be if someone was running and doing that kind of like epic, serious training montage leading up to the fact that they were just really trying to get an apple fritter. And that's really where the idea came from. The next step in the planning phase was that I wrote that voiceover in a note on my phone. And then I hit up my friend Ryan. He's an absolutely wonderful filmmaker here on Vancouver Island. We met when I moved out here and we've been looking for something to work on together ever since. So I threw the idea past him and he was totally down. One of the big things that was working against us is that Ryan is a very busy person and he's always gallivanting all over the world, shooting all these documentaries and stuff. He basically said, I've got this one day next week that I can shoot it and then I'm gone for like 3 months. So we had very little prep time and we had very little shooting time. So Ryan reached out to a friend named Sabrina who was willing to be our talent for the commercial. I reached out to Discovery Coffee and they were totally down to let us come in just after close and film for about half an hour. Now, as far as your typical kind of planning for some kind of a shoot like this, we kept it really simple. There was no storyboard. Ryan had kind of a loose shot list that he wanted to get and we kind of discussed what shots we wanted. The big thing was just getting enough coverage of the running scene that we could cut something together and kind of create it in the actual post-production process. But we had the idea, we had the talent, we figured out the location, so all that was left to do was to shoot the thing. When I first reached out to Ryan, I knew he had a Sony FX3, so I figured between my FX3 and his FX3, we'd probably be shooting on an FX3, but I found out he has access to a DJI Ronin 4D and he was excited to shoot on that, so that's what we shot most of it with the exception of the coffee shop scene, which was on a Sony FX3. Pretty much the whole thing was shot on a Sony 35mm f1.8 lens, which happens to be what I'm filming this on as well. It's one of my favorite lenses and it was definitely a familiar look when I went to color grade. We generally kind of knew a couple of the shots that we wanted to get, but mostly it was about getting coverage. So there were shots where he was running alongside her, there were shots where he was behind her, shots where he was in front of her, and then there were close-ups, and there were mediums, and there were wides, and there was so much footage. But in the end, having all of that available to me made the edit so much easier. Now, if you know the DJI Ronin 4D, you'll know that it has a gimbal built onto it. But for some of it, I really wanted to get that that kind of shaky handheld look, so he put it into what I believe is called sport mode, and boy did that pay off, because some of the shots give that kind of panicked feeling that I really wanted to get. I really wanted to give the idea that this person was like in a hurry. So we ended up kind of cutting back and forth between smooth shots and shaky shots, but I think in the end it felt like a good balance of both. As far as audio goes, Ryan did bring a field recorder so that we could try and get some, and the audio that we got on location was horrible. So basically I knew right off the bat I was gonna have to replace all the audio and make it all myself. As far as lighting goes, I brought an Amaran T2C out into the forest to get a little bit of fill light where we needed it. We didn't use it much, but on a couple of shots it made a big difference. And then when we were filming in the coffee shop, I brought in the Amaran F22C, but most of the light that we were using was generally just coming through the windows. So overall, it's almost all natural or environment light shooting. Part of that was because it just worked, and part of it was because we were in such a hurry to get things done that one day that we didn't really have much other choice. And somehow we managed to get everything that we needed that day, except for an apple fritter, and move on to the editing phase. Doing the edit for this project wasn't anything too technical or difficult. For the most part, it's just stringing clips together, but there were a couple of really important points to it, and then one kind of tricky transition that I had to do. The first important point was the music. I got the music for this video from Track Club. You've probably heard me talk about them in other videos if you've been watching my channel for a little while, and they are also the sponsor of this video. So when I went to find music, I knew I wanted something kind of epic. I knew I wanted it to be kind of that rock, orchestral, electronic, and really kind of cinematic. So you can use these filters to try and figure out what you want. And this is a great way to be able to find music. So we go under mood and I choose cinematic. Under genre, I wanted electronic and orchestral and rock. And then I just kind of was like auditioning some of these, and I came across this track called Hemi. And this was the one immediately when I first heard those first gun gun, that I knew that was going to be it. Now on Track Club, one of their kind of key features is that you can take this and you can go to something called MixLab. In MixLab, you have control over something called stems. So stems are basically broken down all the different parts of the song. So we've got vocals, we've got vocal samples, we've got horns, strings, keys, guitar. So it's broken down into all these different things, and we can mute different parts if we don't want them. We can turn up or down the volume, and then we can download a custom version of that song just for our production. But on top of that, and what I did for this specific one, you can actually download all of the stems. And the reason that I wanted to go this way is because I wasn't 100% sure what I needed quite yet. So I couldn't do it in MixLab right off the bat, but the fact that I have all those options is super awesome. And on top of this browse feature, Track Club is really great for their Discover page. They've got lots of great recommendations. They've got playlists. They've even got some playlists from maybe some of your favorite creators that you can check out on there. Definitely go check out Track Club. There's a link down in the description that'll give you 1 month free so you can try it out, fall in love just like I did, and use it on your own videos. Huge thank you to Track Club for sponsoring this video. So all these green tracks are the music. So the very top one is actually the full mix, so the regular song, and then everything underneath it are all the stems. But I thought that the whole mix was just fine for me. It worked great. So I just went into my index here and I hid all of those stems tracks, made sure that they were muted so that I wasn't listening to them. And I needed to cut it down somewhere between that 45-second and 1 minute mark. So basically we've got the intro and then we've got this. You can also see that I've put a bunch of markers on there. I just did this because it makes it easier to edit to the music. Now, most of these are just on the big hits. There are some parts that hit with those big hits, and then there's some parts that there are cuts, but they're still with the rhythm of the music. Maybe that's just because of my music background, and so that's kind of an important thing to me, but I find it makes it nice for the pacing of the edit itself. So the first thing that I did when I went to edit is that I went into a selects timeline. So I basically dragged all the footage onto a timeline and I went through everything and pulled up onto this second video track the parts that I thought were going to be the most useful. Then I could highlight all of those and drag them into a media pool, and DaVinci Resolve would create subclips for me. So I've got this whole folder dragging from here up into the selects folder, and it created those all for me. So it's kind of like setting in and out points, but just a different method to do it. Then I started by pulling all of those selects into what I called timeline rough 01, which just ended up being the end timeline in the end anyway. Then it was just a matter of stringing the clips together in a way that felt right. We've got a wide shot, medium shot, close up, wide shot, medium shot, close up, so on and so forth. You get the idea. There's not too many of the same type of shot. There are a couple of little things that I did, like for example, on this first shot, I've got an adjustment layer where I'm just ever so slightly pushing in on my subject. Then there's that same thing again when we've got this other wide shot. At the very end, we've got the same thing, just to kind of get really in close and make it feel like the world's closing in. And the only real kind of fancy editing thing that I had to do on this project was to get this transition where we're behind the tree and we jump from the forest into the city. So we had her jump over a log with a tree in the foreground. So if we look at the original of that, it's actually facing the other way. So that was, I guess, one thing that I had to do throughout, is make sure that all of our shots were moving in the same direction. This was another shot where I had to flip it. Even this one, I wanted her facing the same direction as she was going to be running. So you can see there's the original and here's the flipped version. It was something we kind of talked about on the day of while we were shooting, and we tried our best, but certain situations meant that we had to go the other way. So I just literally flipped it horizontally by going into my inspector and just hitting this horizontal flip button. But when looking at the original, it's going the other way, and you can see that she just jumps over this log, and then there's the tree in the foreground. Then in the other shot, so the one in the city, there's a tree in the foreground in this kind of courtyard. So we just had her do a little hop right in front of the tree. And then what I did is I went into Fusion, I added a polygon. You can see it's drawn right around the whole thing. So currently we're seeing the whole frame. So I went frame by frame and I drew that polygon back, still on the edge of the tree, still on the edge of the tree, and then in the next frame it's gone. And so what that turned out like, the tree from the forest shot is kind of our foreground element. It just happens to be lined up with the other tree, but you could almost get away without that other tree in the shot. We did that just in case. So now we've got this. We've got that nice kind of jump into the city. The next thing after I got both the music and the edit done was the color grade. For the color grade on this one, I really wanted to kind of mimic some of those running commercials. So it's kind of dark and moody. There's lots of blues in the shadows. It's a little bit desaturated, but I really wanted to preserve my skin tones as well. So that was kind of what was going through my mind as I was doing this. Now I did it in a bit of a unique method from the way that I work a lot of the time for like my YouTube videos and stuff. I actually grouped together all of the clips from the Ronin 4D. So you can see this little group thing here. So all you do is shift click to select multiple, right click and hit add into a new group. And then I did most of the grading, most of the look either in the group pre-clip or group post clip. So what this included was my color space transform from D-Log to DaVinci Wide Gamut, and then just some kind of basic balance and the exposure. I noticed that all of them had a similar kind of exposure, so I thought I could do them all at the same time this way. Then after that, it goes to the clip. Now this is where I would do individual edits for each clip. So if one clip was a little bit brighter than the other one, I could pull it down, or if it was a little bit cooler or warmer, I can make just little adjustments in the clip. And then there's group post clip, and this is our whole look. So on this first one here, I've got a bit of a mask to preserve my skin tones. So that's doing a lot of the desaturation and the blue of the background. Our trees are actually quite yellow before, but I made them a bit more of a blue green, and then I desaturated them quite a bit. So it looks a little bit colder. In the next node here, we've just got a little bit of contrast. Then I've got a node with Dehancer Pro logo on there. This is just a plugin that allows me to do a Kodak 2383 print film emulation. So that makes it look like it's film. And then finally, we've got the DaVinci wide gamut to Rec 709 conversion again. But you might be thinking, what is this down here? This is just a color space transform going from DaVinci wide gamut to Rec 709A so that I can get a cleaner key. So this is just that skin key, and then that goes into that first node, literally just the key, not the actual picture itself. And then it's inverted here, so it's only doing everything except the skin. So kind of the skin is like safe from this one node. So literally every clip that came from the Ronin 4D has all of this stuff and all of the group pre-clip, but then each clip has its own adjustments here. So for example, this one looks like I just needed to make it darker. This one I didn't do anything to. There was the odd one where I had to do some masking or something like that. Like this first shot here, I actually separated. I've got two parallel nodes coming from the input. One is her, and I used Magic Mask for this, so you can see that it isolated her. And then one was the background, just so that I could bring down the background and kind of treat those things a little bit separately. And that's pretty much the same thing that I used later as well. So once we get to the donut shop, my base correction there for the clip, and then I've got another Magic Mask. So you can see I've highlighted her and then inverted it here. So now you'll see that this node is affecting everything except her. And so what that's allowing me to do is just pull down the background a little bit because it was just a little too bright for me. After that, I've got an outside node, which literally means it's just her. So it's the opposite of whatever the mask is on this one. Without that, she's a little dark, so I just wanted to bring her up a little bit, but she was fine at the start. And so all I did was literally automated the shadows. So I set a keyframe at the start. As we move through this, you'll see that the shadows gradually moves to 12.5. And then on the final shot of her as well, I did a couple of different masks. So we've got, again, that same mask so that I can bring down the background. Then we've got an outside node just to kind of even her out because she was actually a little bit too bright as well. Then I've got two nodes just to brighten up her eyes a little bit. I really wanted to draw attention to the eyes. So I've got two circular masks here, kind of just around her eyes. We're just brightening up the areas around her eyes a little bit. And we've got that tracked, so I've got it following along. And then on the final node, I actually just went in and did just like the iris and pupil, again, just kind of brightening it up so we can see before and after. Again, I just really wanted to draw attention into the eyes. And again, those masks have been tracked, so they will follow along with the pupils. So once we're done the edit and the color grade, I needed just that last little bit for the visuals to be done, and that was the logo and the titles at the end. And it was actually really simple. All I did was go into Midjourney and I typed to imagine a logo for a donut shop, cartoon, and it came up with a couple of different options. I got some variants on those to see which one I liked the best. I came up with this one, and then I pulled it into Photoshop and I quickly tossed on some titles there for Dunna's Donuts. And then inside DaVinci Resolve, I added the two titles that say "Come Early, They're That Good," and the logo, and it just pops on there. Thank goodness for AI, because I could not have drawn that cartoon. It's kind of creepy looking, but I think it's kind of funny. So once I had the foundation of the music and the picture all good to go, we had to move on to audio. And we started that with the voiceover. Recently on Instagram, I saw Colin and Samir talking about something called 11 Labs. Long story short, this is an online voice generator. So with this drop down here, you can play through and hear which voices you want. I picked Josh.
I have often regretted my speech, never my silence.
And then I just pasted my script down here, hit generate, and I got my file. And then in DaVinci Resolve, I just kind of chopped it up and placed it in the places where it felt right.
There are few things in life worth giving up everything for. Things worth pushing through the pain and struggle to achieve the end goal. But when you do find that thing, there is nothing you wouldn't do. No task too difficult, no misery too unbearable that you wouldn't push through to overcome, achieve success, and lay your hands on that wonderful prize.
He maybe gets a little bit bored sounding by the end, but with the epic music, you don't really notice. So while I was doing that, I was thinking I really need a solution for the bad audio at the end, because when we were at the coffee shop, the audio was absolutely horrible.
Tell me you have one.
We're out.
Not again.
For my part, I just quickly did a voiceover, but I thought, you know what? We might be able to actually enhance the performance a little bit if I can match the voice with another voice from 11 Labs. So I tried it just, out on a whim here, and here's what I got.
Tell me you have one.
We're out.
Not again.
Especially on the not again at the end, I really liked how kind of panicked it sounded. That was kind of the performance that I was really looking for there. I had to do some weird things like put things before the tell me you have one. So for example, I said, I'm so sad, tell me you have one, so that it would know that it was supposed to sound sad kind of thing. And it was pretty good at figuring out what it needed to sound like based on the first couple of words. So once I got the voices done and I used all this crazy AI to make my life easier, I had to do all the sound design. I got nothing usable from the actual live recordings on the day, so everything in this entire piece is all sound effects from a bunch of different libraries. I downloaded like 40 new sounds and I used sounds from libraries that I currently had. So here's what it sounds like, just the sound design. So no music, no voiceover, none of that. So I've got my sound effects all kind of grouped off. So we've got our ambience in the orange here. Then we've got the city. Then we've got the coffee shop. Next, I've got a handful of tracks for just clothing. So just Foley of the moving clothing, the cotton rustling against each other. So we've got some like cotton sounds, and then we've got this kind of leather creaking. And then through the whole running section, there's just lots of little like that kind of sound. Then the next track is just footfalls. So through the whole running section, every footstep has a footfall sound effect. So I tried to get a couple of different sounds for the different surfaces that she was going to be walking and running on. The next two tracks are for breathing, so I've just got some kind of heavy breathing going on during the running section. And anywhere where there was a close-up of her face while she was running, so for example right here, I've raised the volume of that specific clip just a little bit so that you get this kind of like sensation of like you're close to her now. And then the second breath track is literally for this one breath that I added a bunch of reverb to. Kind of more of an effect than anything. Then I've got a couple of tracks here that I called action sound effects, but basically they're just for the door. So we've got... And then there's the like shop bell. And that just repeats again at the end together. And the next few tracks are for any kinds of effects, impacts, whooshes, transitions, those kinds of things. Right off the bat, I've got that impact hit. Then with the breath, I've got this kind of reverb whoosh. I used a handful of these risers to kind of bring us into new sections. So that one kind of hits with the music and goes to the running section. We've got a wind whoosh when she jumps over the log, as well as a secondary whoosh kind of working together. And for this one on the bottom here, I've actually automated the panning so that it moves from left to right. So it kind of feels like it is the tree whooshing by. Then we've got another riser going on. right into that end screen. Sound design is so important. A lot of the mixing I did at the clip level, especially on the sound effects there, so I'm just adjusting the volumes and stuff. On the voiceover stuff, I did a little bit of EQing and maybe a little bit of compression. I also added a little bit of a reverb to the dialogue that was happening in the coffee shop to try and make it sound like it was actually in a coffee shop. But other than some basic EQ compression and then those couple of reverbs, it's mostly just getting the levels right throughout the different tracks. So now that the whole thing is done and I've watched it back, what would I change next time I go to shoot a spec commercial like this? Well, first of all, I would make sure that I had more time. Obviously, working under pressure is just dependent on each project and it just happens, so maybe it was good practice, but it would definitely be good to have something like a storyboard. Taking a little bit of extra time in that planning phase can save you such a headache when it comes to actually shooting. I don't necessarily mind all the sound design, but trying to replace the voices and trying to make it look real was really difficult, so it would have been really nice to get cleaner audio on the day of. The bottom line here is that I could probably tweak this thing forever. Even coming to this point so that I could make this video was really difficult because I never wanted to call it done. And eventually I just had to say, this is good enough. But as always, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment down below and let me know if you've ever shot a spec commercial like this, or if you plan to. If you found this video helpful, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button and check out this video next. I think you'll really like it. Huge thank you to Track Club for sponsoring this video. Thank you to Discovery Coffee for letting us film in their space, and to Ryan and Sabrina for doing this project with me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.